The studio lights burned with an unforgiving brilliance, bouncing off the glossy white desk that separated Ivanka Trump and Representative Jasmine Crockett. Two women whose mutual contempt had been carefully disguised under layers of political politeness for far too long. The debate had been booked weeks in advance. A primetime segment that was supposed to be about economic policies, foreign relations, and the future of the nation. But from the moment the cameras started rolling, it became clear to everyone watching, whether they were in the room or on the other side of the screen, that this was about something far deeper and far more personal. Ivanka sat with her perfect posture, a practiced half-smile resting on her lips, the kind that was meant to signal both poise and superiority. And her voice dripped with a patronizing sweetness as she delivered her latest point about maintaining traditional values in America. Jasmine, meanwhile, sat with the steady confidence of someone who had walked through fire more than once. Her hands folded neatly in front of her, her gaze locked directly on her opponent. The audience, both the live studio crowd and the millions tuning in, could feel the tension building between them like a gathering storm. And while the host tried to keep the conversation tethered to policy, the undertow of something unsaid kept tugging the discussion toward the inevitable explosion. Then, like a match striking the edge of a worn-out box, Ivanka leaned forward, her voice just loud enough to carry over the mild hum of the cameras, and with a perfectly timed smirk, she said, "You know, Jasmine, I respect that you have your beliefs, but some of us don't have the luxury of hiding behind religion when we can't explain our ideas." It was a line delivered with the precision of a dagger, meant to cut not just into a political rival, but into the core of who they were. The live audience gave a collective gasp, not loud enough to derail the moment, but just sharp enough to register on the broadcast mics. Jasmine didn't flinch. She didn't look away. She didn't even blink. She simply let the words hang there in the air for a fraction longer than anyone was comfortable with, the silence pressing down on the set until even the host shifted in his seat. And then, slowly, Jasmine tilted her head just slightly, her expression unreadable, the calm before a thunderclap that everyone instinctively knew was coming. Her hands unfolded, one moving to rest gently on the desk, fingertips pressing into the surface as if grounding herself in the moment. And when she spoke, her voice was soft, so soft that people in the front row leaned forward to catch every syllable. "Ivanka," she said, her tone wrapped in velvet but carrying the weight of steel beneath. "You may think my faith is something you can mock, something you can treat like a prop for your little sound bites, but what you don't understand is that it's the reason I'm still here after everything people like you have tried to do to silence me." The words didn't rise yet, but the air shifted. It was the kind of moment when the truth began to unfurl, slow and unstoppable. Like the first ripple in a pond before the wave crashes, Ivanka's smirk faltered just slightly, just enough for the camera to catch a tan. Jasmine, sensing the opening, continued. She didn't rush. She didn't need to. Her voice was steady, deliberate, each word landing like a pebble in the still water between them. "You see, I grew up watching people dismiss women like me. People who thought faith was a weakness, something to be laughed at because they couldn't measure it on their little charts or package it for a campaign ad. Ain't. But my faith isn't a campaign slogan. It's not a talking point. It's the foundation that's carried me through nights when I didn't know if I'd survive until morning. Through battles you wouldn't last 5 minutes in because you've never had to fight. For anything real in your life?" The murmurs in the crowd grew louder, a low rumble that the producers in the control room were scrambling to manage. Ivanka shifted again, this time crossing her legs in a way that seemed more defensive than elegant. And her eyes flickered toward the host, as if silently pleading for an interruption. But none came. Jasmine was holding the floor now, and nothing not. The cameras, not the lights. Not the weight of the network's time constraints was going to pull her off it. "You mock my faith because you don't understand it," she went on, the words gaining heat now, like embers catching wind. "But that's not surprising. You were born into comfort. You've lived in rooms where doors opened before you touched. Them where people nodded and smiled and said yes before you even asked the question. My God is the one who opened doors for me when every single one was slammed in my face. My God is the one who kept me standing when powerful people tried to tear me down. You know why you think it's cute to laugh at what you don't understand? Let me remind you, faith is not weakness. It's power. And it's the kind of power you can't buy, you can't fake, and you sure as hell can't take from me. By the time she reached the last sentence, her voice had risen not to a shout, but to that sharp, resonant clarity that cuts through every distraction, every whisper, every side comment. The room was still, the kind of stillness that meant everyone knew they were witnessing something they would remember for the rest of their lives. Ivanka's lips parted slightly. Whether to speak or to breathe, no one could quite tell. But whatever she might have been about to say was swallowed by the weight of the silence that followed Jasmine's words. The host glanced at the cameras, clearly aware that this moment was going to be clipped, shared, and replayed across every social media platform within minutes. And Jasmine. She just leaned back in her chair, that calm composure settling over her again, as if she hadn't just dismantled her opponent on live television with the grace of a woman who knew exactly who she was and exactly where her strength came from. The pause after Jasmine's words was almost unbearable in its intensity, the kind of silence that seemed to thicken the air itself, making every breath feel heavier than the last. It wasn't just a television moment anymore, it was history, in the making, and everyone in the studio seemed to know it. The producers, hidden away in the control room behind a wall of glowing monitors, exchanged glances, filled with both panic and awe. They could feel the ratings soaring, but they also knew that moments like this could not be manufactured, could not be scripted, could not be tamed. The audience was frozen in place, their eyes locked on the two women who sat across from each other as if they were the only two people in existence, their ideological clash now elevated into something more primal and personal. Ivanka, for all her years of media training, her carefully crafted public persona, and her inherited confidence, seemed suddenly adrift, caught off guard in a way she hadn't been in years. Her lips pressed together into a thin line, her hands folded in her lap just a little too tightly, the telltale sign of someone trying to regain control. But Jasmine had no intention of letting her regain it. The Congresswoman's gaze was unwavering, steady and unblinking, the gaze of someone who knew she had struck a nerve so deep it would take days, maybe weeks, to recover from. When Jasmine spoke again, her voice carried the same calm strength as before. But now there was a sharper edge to it, a precision honed from years of cutting through lies, deflections, and condescension. The thing about faith, Ivanka, she said slowly, is that it doesn't require your approval to be real. It doesn't shrink just because someone like you laughs at it. It grows in the face of mockery. It strengthens when it's challenged. The more people like you try to undermine it, the stronger it becomes. She let the words settle for a beat, then leaned forward just slightly, her eyes narrowing in a way that made the distance between them feel smaller, more dangerous. You've lived in a world where image is everything. Reality is whatever you can spin it into, but faith doesn't work like that. You can't spin it. You can't edit it. You can't polish it for a photo op. It's raw. It's unfiltered. And it's the one thing in this world you can't fake your way into having. The audience's murmurs swelled again, and Ivanka's eyes flickered with something that looked, just for a fraction of a second, like uncertainty and emotion she almost never let show in public. The host shifted uncomfortably, his hands twitching toward his stack of cue cards, as though they might hold the escape hatch he was searching for. But Jasmine wasn't done, not by a long shot. Her tone softened again, almost conversational, but every word was aimed with deadly accuracy. Do you know what it's like, Ivanka? To wake up every morning knowing there are people in power who want you silenced simply because you speak the truth? Do you know what it's like to walk into rooms where you're not just underestimated, you're outright dismissed before you even say a word? My faith is what gives me the courage to walk into those rooms anyway. It's what keeps me standing when the walls start closing in. It's what reminds me that no matter how loud the lies get, the truth will always outlast them. The crowd erupted into applause, not the polite kind, but the kind that starts in the chest and bursts out, unrestrained and unplanned. The host tried to quiet them, but their energy had shifted. They weren't just watching a debate anymore. They were witnessing a reckoning. Ivanka's carefully composed mask cracked again, this time in the form of a quick, shallow breath that she hoped no one would notice. But the cameras caught it. The audience caught it. Jasmine caught it. And that was all the fuel she needed. "You mock my God because you think it makes you look bold," Jasmine continued, her voice rising now. "Not in volume, but in force. But it's not boldness, it's ignorance. And ignorance has never impressed me, no matter how much money it wears or how famous its last name is. You want to question my ideas? Fine, I'll defend them all day long. But you will not disrespect the very thing that has kept me alive, that has shaped me, has given me the strength to stand against people who are far more dangerous than you will ever be." By now the applause had turned into cheers from pockets of the audience, and the host was doing his best to maintain some semblance of order. Ivanka, visibly rattled, adjusted the cuff of her jacket, a small, meaningless movement that betrayed just how unsettled she had become. She opened her mouth to speak, but Jasmine wasn't done. She had built the momentum, and she intended to ride it until the very last second. "You call yourself a woman of strength," Jasmine said, her eyes never leaving Ivanka's. "But strength isn't inherited. It isn't handed to you along with a penthouse view and a trust fund. Strength is built in the struggle, in the nights you cry yourself to sleep but wake up the next morning, ready to fight again. Strength is when you lose everything and still find a way to stand, and that's something you'll never understand as long as you think the world owes you a pedestal." The energy in the room was electric now. Every eye fixed on the two women at the center of it all. Ivanka blinked, slow and deliberate, as if trying to absorb the full weight of the attack, but there was no way to deflect it, not this time. Jasmine leaned back again, the faintest hint of a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. The smile of someone who knew the truth was finally out in the open, and there was no stuffing it back in the shadows. The host exhaled, realizing only then that he'd been holding his breath, and signaled for a commercial break. But even as the cameras cut away, the moment lingered, etched into the memory of everyone who had just witnessed it.